wisdom,
prudentia,
justice,
justitia,
temperance,
temperantia,
courage.
fortitudo.
Applying ancient philosophy to modern life, this is the Sunday Stoic.
Welcome to the Sunday Stoic Podcast. This is Steve. I'm here along with Dan. Dan, how are things in your world?
Well, I'm doing well, but it's been rather stormy here today. You might hear some thunder in the background.
That's all right. We're all trying to live according to nature. We can handle a little bit of thunder in the background. This is the Sunday Stoic Podcast, where we look at ancient philosophy and how to apply it to modern life. And today we will investigate the Enchiridion, books 3 and 4. We've been working our way through the Enchiridion as written by Arrian, which is supposed to be notes from the famous Stoic philosopher Epictetus. And this is the handbook. The Enchiridion is the handbook. It's a condensed form of those notes, something that you can almost easily memorize and carry around with you. In fact, there is a famous fighter pilot, James Stockdale, who was shot down in Vietnam, who committed a lot of the lessons of the Enchiridion to memory and utilized them to survive being captured and held in the Hanoi Hilton in Vietnam. So this stuff we're talking about, some of it seems harsh, some of it seems strange, but depending on the circumstances you find yourself in, the lessons can be quite helpful. So Dan's going to lead us off today. How about, Dan, we start with the Enchiridion, Book 3.
With regard to whatever objects either delight the mind or contribute to use or are tenderly beloved, remind yourself of what nature they are, beginning with the merest trifles. If you have a favorite cup, that it is but a cup, of which you are fond. For thus, if it is broken, you can bear it. If you embrace your child or your wife, that you embrace a mortal, and thus, if either of them dies, you can bear it.
Ouch. I think that's a reading that puts a lot of people off when they first look into it. I remember reading the Enchiridion for the first time right when I first got interested in Stoicism, and it's right there. It's number 3. It's right at the beginning, so you get to it right away before you have a lot of background, and it's like, whoa.
And I imagine quite a few people read this one and go, "Oh, not for me," and they just kind of toss the book aside.
I'm out. I'm out. Not for me. Yeah,
tapping
absolutely. Yeah, it's a rough one, but remember, first of all, this is Epictetus. He's what I call the drill sergeant of Stoicism. So he's a little more pushy, a little more influenced by the Cynics and other philosophers, which you may have heard of, that were a little more hardcore. But also bear in mind, we can take his lessons and apply it differently, or we don't have to start that harsh. Let's just start there. The sage might be that harsh, the perfect Stoic, but we are not sages. And also keep in mind that when it comes to the loss of a child, which is no laughing matter, back then especially, for example, even the Emperor Marcus Aurelius lost something like 5 children. So this was a common occurrence.
Yeah, child mortality was very common all the way up until even the 19th century. So.
Absolutely. So we're starting off here by saying to remind ourselves what things are. And so what is your favorite cup? Dan, what's your favorite cup made out of?
Well, I recently encountered my favorite cup when last week my semi-new car, it's less than a year old, I returned to it. And in my absence, the top of my hood had been gouged so thoroughly that it was down to the metal underneath the paint.
Uh-oh. And
yeah, that was a bummer. And I was quite proud of myself because all it did to me really was make me take a deep breath and
right. And your cherished car, a little bit more expensive than a cup in this case.
Well, I purposely buy inexpensive cars for this reason.
Understood.
So that when they break, they won't disturb my equanimity as much as if I
purchase something
Sure.
outrageous.
Yeah, and the whole idea is your favorite cup, your car, whatever. What is it? One thing we've learned, and for those of you just joining the podcast, you may not know that I had done this same podcast for about 5 years and had over 300 episodes before stopping for a while. We've returned. So I'm going to talk as if maybe you've heard some of those episodes, but we're going to revisit a lot of the basics of this philosophy. But your car, your cup, what's it made out of? The cup's clay. That's it. So if you look at it, say that's a lump of clay. Your car, that's metal and paint. What happens to metal and paint, Dan? Do they always stick together?
Well, for a short time, yes, but in the cosmic sense, no. They will separate in. I'm trying to think of the word I just read Marcus Aurelius use about the breakdown of everything.
Yeah, everything dissolves back to the cosmos in the end. I forget the terms that they translate that as, but everything undergoes dissolution over time. Everything breaks down, entropy kicks in. And if we remind ourselves of that when it happens, it doesn't have to take our breath away for as long or impact us as hard emotionally. Now, when it comes to the hardcore example he uses, we may not pretend that we're just going to be like, oh, my child died. Well, they were mortal. But the idea is you should think about it, even if it's not for the reasons he says, to just if something happens to them, you'll say, well, they were mortal. I knew this would potentially happen. Instead, think of it this way. Let's flip it a little bit. Let's reframe it slightly. Your child, your loved one, your wife, your husband, whatever, they're mortal. They will die one day. Okay, Epictetus is telling us how maybe you might bear that by just reminding yourselves they're mortal, so that you realize that's a real potential. They could go away. But more importantly than that, from my perspective, is realizing that and then living accordingly now.
Right, you should appreciate them while you do have them.
While you have them, kiss them goodnight, read them that story, take them to dinner, cook them dinner, whatever.
And if you're in conflict with your significant other, for example, remind yourself that whatever you're debating about isn't nearly as important as that person is. So
sure.
If you're fighting about the dishes and then she goes off to work, you don't know for a certainty that she's going to be coming home from work, because she might get into a car wreck or something else tragic might happen. And do you really want the last thing you said to your wife but be a fight about the dishes or who's going to take the trash out or anything petty like that?
Right. I mean, and it's true. Like so many people I've known, they're gone when you don't expect it. And then you think about the last interaction you had with them and it's like, I wish I'd done a little more, So keeping that in mind can help you to have fewer regrets in the end, I think. Do you have anything else you'd like to add about the Enchiridion 3, Dan?
Yeah, lately I've been coming around to think that maybe what Epictetus is getting at is not so much, as you say, just be flippant about it when someone that's important to you dies. I think it's more that not giving into the passion of grief long term and let it destroy you.
Which Seneca goes into in a lot more detail.
Yeah, Seneca's more explicit about it, and saying that grief is to be expected, but you got to keep it within certain bounds. You can't let it make it so you're not functional.
Right, yeah.
It kind of reminds me of, you remember the story that Epictetus tells in the Discourses about the father who comes to visit Epictetus, and he said that his child was ill.
Oh, yes.
He was
it's one of my favorite examples of the roles that he teaches about, yeah.
Right, and he was so fearful that he ran away because he was afraid that his daughter was going to die. And he asked Epictetus whether he acted correctly, and Epictetus, of course, said, no.
No.
You're her dad. Could you imagine if everybody who was in charge of taking care of your sick child had done the same and run away?
And
you
she's
should have
laying there
stayed
by
there.
herself, right?
Right, exactly. We're all going to wish her well from our distance, So
I'll pray for you
yeah,
at the bar across the street. Yeah.
exactly. So he chastised him and said that he was not fulfilling his role as a father, and that he should have stayed with his daughter.
Right. Yeah. So we're not unfeeling. We're not robots or statues, as Epictetus would say. And we would grieve. And as Dan said, it could be, if we look at what Epictetus is saying and maybe step back from it for, briefly, don't assume that you'll just instantaneously say, well, they're dead. I knew they would die. Moving on. But instead, you might more, I won't say easily, but more skillfully manage your grief if something would happen, so that it doesn't consume you entirely, that you can recover and become a functional member of society again over a much shorter period of time than if you pretended like everyone would live forever and you are caught totally by surprise if something should happen to them.
And I think another thing that might bear on this is to bring in another Stoic concept called oikiosis, which means affinity. And of course, at first, you only have affinity for yourself and your own mind and your own interests. But then as you develop mentally, you start to recognize your affinity for your parents and your siblings. And eventually, when you're old enough, for your spouse and your children. And obviously, you can't care about your children and your wife's interests as if they're your own unless they're important to you. And the loss of that would be, it will put you off. You will not just, as you say, flippantly say do, but yes. But the idea, I think, is that you be able to recover so that you can, like, let's say your wife did die, and you have children. Would it be useful for your children to have a father that is unable to function and, provide for their children? And so
it's a tough world out there. We're just trying to figure out how to align with reality and work with what we got, right, Dan?
Yes.
Absolutely. So, well, as we move forward then within the Enchiridion, we're going to continue this idea of thinking about things that could happen. This is something that often called premeditatio malorum, which means the premeditation of bad things in Latin. And
I read somewhere somebody put it premeditation of adversity, and I like that one.
Yeah. Malorum, like a malignant tumor, is bad, right?
Right.
Malus means bad, and
In Spanish,
premeditatio, the premeditation of the bad. So yeah, we're thinking about adversities that may occur. More importantly, adversities that are likely to occur, because we know we could go down a rabbit hole of anxiety if we try to think about everything that might occur. But
Seneca does advise you to think about everything that could happen.
Yeah. I don't know if I have the mind for that. I might end up chewing on my fingernails and the rest of my hair would fall out. But
yes, at the very least, you do want to think about the things that have a substantial likelihood of happening.
Right, much like Marcus Aurelius's, first, that first write up in chapter 2, I think, of the Meditations about all the people you're going to run into today as emperor. All the backbiters and the backstabbers and the beggars.
That's book 2.1.
So on and so forth, and that's things that he knew he would have to deal with. I know things I will run into every day as a teacher, or you, if you're a police officer, you'll know what you'll run into today, or whatever your job is or your role in life, you'll know likely scenarios that are going to happen, and you can think about those. So with that in mind, I bring you, or Dan brings you, the Enchiridion, chapter 4.
When you set about any action, remind yourself of what nature the action is. If you're going to bathe, represent to yourself the incidents usual in the bath. Some splashing the water, others pushing against one another, others scolding, and others stealing. And thus you'll more safely go about this action if you say to yourself, I will now go to bathe and keep my own will in harmony with nature. And so, with regard to every other action. For thus, if any impediment arises in bathing, you will be able to say, "It was not only to bathe that I desired, but to keep my will in harmony with nature, and I shall not keep it thus, if I am out of humor at the things that happen."
All right. Well, I think I don't go to too many Roman baths. I don't know about you over there in the New York area, but
Yeah,
I go to
I
Walmart.
think the Roman baths. I think the Roman baths were their time period's equivalent of the modern Stoics' discussion of traffic.
Right. I think of going to Walmart at the wrong time of day. That's something I've experienced that I'm not a fan of. You see every cross-section of human society and incompetence.
To the best of my knowledge, we don't have Walmarts in the 5 boroughs. But we do have the subway, and in the subway, you run into everybody except for the very wealthy. So you get to see everybody.
You get to see everybody, yeah. And so first of all, one thing I try to do, I actually thought about making a banner for my phone as well for the same reason. We're thinking about premeditation of problems that might arise. And one issue, let's just say my phone. I thought about putting a banner on my phone when you pick it up that just says something like wisdom will not be found here, or something along those lines, because you can spend so much time
not to waste time.
So much time wasted. You can find wisdom using your phone, but is that what it's mostly used for? Probably not. Now, you walk into Walmart, you can think, okay, what am I going to encounter here? Now, if you're from elsewhere in the world or somewhere like Dan, where he's lucky enough not to have such fine establishments as Walmart,
well, we do
have your own issues.
Other things.
You have your other things. And so what do you know you're going to run into? You're going to run into people stopping and talking in the middle of an aisle, blocking the flow of traffic, or right past the thing you came to the store for, almost inevitably. You're going to deal with something that doesn't ring up correctly at the checkout line. You're going to deal with long lines to get out. Nowadays, you have to use the self-checkout, which will surely have some sort of error. And so you can plan for all this ahead of time. So when it happens, rather than saying, what the heck is going on? Why does this always happen to me? This is blah, and you're blowing up. You can think of it as one of two ways. You can think of it as, I knew this would probably happen. Yep, there it is. I called that. Ha ha. Or you can say, the Stoic gods have put me to the test, and they're testing me. They're trying to make me better by putting this obstacle in front of me to see how I react. And I'm going to learn and grow from this experience, and I'll be fine. But either way, you hold your equanimity is the goal while going through these processes. I often also think as I walk up to a store like Walmart, I think I should say happiness does not reside in here, or something. You're not going. You can't buy happiness in here. Just get what you need and get out. Don't shop around and blow money on stuff you don't need, and it's not going to make you happy. Everything in that store is going to be probably in a landfill in 30 years, and that's a sad truth. And it helps you to remember some of those Stoic mindsets that we'll talk about as we go. The not only the premeditation of evils, but thinking about what's going to happen to objects around you and break them down to their fundamental parts, and realize that all this stuff we're fighting so hard to keep is going to be gone in 100 years. It'll pass away just about as fast as our memory will from society when we're gone. So figure out what's important and stick to those things, and make those the things you work hard at. Well, Dan, what kind of things do you keep in mind when navigating places you frequent in your neck of the woods? What kind of premeditations do you have to keep at hand to keep your cool?
Well, I'm sure you can imagine that New York City as traffic is quite a thing. And I always remind myself of all the various shenanigans that people will get up to.
Do you have to Well, let me ask you this. Do you get screamed at while you're driving by others who don't keep these things in mind, or are you usually not the target of their anger?
I'm not usually their target. It did happen to me last week, and I have no idea what this guy was upset about. But he even gave me the one finger salute and the whole deal.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, when that happens, I'm not going to say I'm good at it, but philosophically, what the best Steve should do would be to say, well, that person thought that was the right thing to do at the time. They might be going through something that I can't imagine or that is well beyond their capacity to deal with right now, and I think that the Christian word for that is give them some grace. Just let it go.
Forgive our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us.
Exactly, because I've trespassed plenty. So, but yeah, try to let things go. Remember the problems you're likely to run into when you walk out your door. You can think about the problems you'll have within your door. Like, my house will have issues. My appliances will break down. My car will get a scratch on it. It goes back to the last reading as well. Both readings today are about thinking of things that might happen that could really upset you. The death of a loved one, just people being rude and in your face or whatever. But if you remember that that's part of being alive, these things happen. That's what it means to live according to nature. You realize how reality actually works, and rather than trying to bend reality to your fantasy, you try to align your expectations with what is likely to happen and how you might deal with it. That's what I get from today's readings. Dan, do you have anything else you want to add before we shut down for the day?
Right. I would just like to reiterate that it's beneficial to think about these things in advance, because nothing will knock you off center and make you more prone to giving in to passions like grief and anger and fear than not having any sort of concept that these kind of things can happen, and you will be surprised. And surprise will always make you more prone to give in to those passions. So thinking about it in advance will give you a framework of how you can respond. Yeah,
and you can think about these things either just mentally as a form of meditation or in a journal, like Marcus Aurelius had done. Just don't turn it into a spiral of negativity. You're just thinking of realistic things that could happen, and you could even ask yourself, what would I do if this did happen? How could I... Some things you can turn to your benefit. I won't claim that everything bad that could happen you can turn to your benefit, but you can think about, how could I make this, what could I take from that? How could I make it, how could I either survive it or use it to thrive if you can really get creative about it?
And use it as an opportunity to exercise your virtue. What would be useful in this situation? Is courage called upon to deal with this, or is it self-control? Is it justice? Do I have to show kindness to this person? Yeah, and you'll work on your application of the virtues as well as your willpower, which are, I think, tied together in many ways. And then you can get through the day, and then when you reflect on your day, you can say, there's an example of something that I did well today, and I want to continue to react that way instead of the way my old self would have reacted to the situation. Or if you fall short, you can think to yourself, how will I do better next time? Absolutely, and you'll fall short more times probably than you succeed, but that's how we make progress, how we climb that mountain. A few steps forward and slip back and pick yourself up, and off you go again in the right direction. So, well, thanks for listening to the Sunday Stoic Podcast. I'm Steve. And I'm Dan.
This is the Sunday Stoic Podcast. Carpe diem.